She isn't your mother. The voice knifes through the winter night an instant before the pounding on my door. The last log in the stove snaps, the cabin flickers, and the lake answers with a hollow groan beneath the ice. I'm on my feet before I know it, crossing the plank floor, cold biting up through my socks. Wind threads through the frame as I unlatch the chain. The door swings open on a rush of air and snow, and there she is, Liv, cheeks raw from the cold, mouth hard as the blade she keeps for gutting fish. The woman who raised me. The woman who taught me to braid my hair, to read the weather by the line of the horizon. The woman I have called mother my entire life. Behind her, the lake is a flat sheet of pewter. A single-yard light throws a cone of pale gold onto the snow, catching the drift of flakes like ash. Liv's shoulders pass me without asking, as if the cabin still belonged to her. Lock it, she says. Please. The please is wrong on her tongue, too soft, too late. On the table lies the thing that dragged me back here after all these years. A brown envelope burned at the edges, the stamp from a hospital archive half a country away, and inside it a cassette and a letter written in a hand I don't recognize. If you read this, Astrid, then the ice has done its work. I am sorry. Signed Ellen. A name that tastes like metal. You opened it, Liv says, seeing the tape. Not a question. What is Ellen to me? My voice shakes. I hate that it shakes. I want steel, I get glass. Liv's eyes flick to the stove, to the tape, to the window, vagrant as a bird that has found itself trapped indoors. Put that away. People will talk. People? I laugh, ugly in my own ears. There's no one here but pines and ice. Don't be clever. Her jaw tightens. It's the old warning, the one that used to keep me in line when I was 15 and angry and too beautiful for a town that doesn't forgive girls for being looked at. Some truths make widows. Some make orphans. You don't know which kind you're holding. I slide the cassette into an ancient player I found in the pantry under a sack of rock salt. The buttons are plastic and stubborn. The machine whirs, coughs, then the speakers hiss like the lake breathing under snow. A woman's voice surfaces, thin, careful, the syllables carrying the slight melody of the north. Astrid, the voice says. If this reaches you, it is because I did not. Paper rustles. They will tell you I was a mistake written out of the record. They will tell you I left. I did not leave. They took you. Liv moves as if struck, one hand splayed on the table, the other pressed white-knuckled to her chest. Turn it off. I don't. Outside, a branch scrapes the window like a fingernail on bone. The voice continues, more breath than sound. Your father is a man who believes the lake keeps secrets. He paid for that belief. He paid others to share it. The room tilts. I taste iron. My father has been dead 10 winters, buried with speeches and flags and a eulogy about integrity, and yet his shadow seems to rise from between the floorboards, damp and cold and old as the water. What did you do? I ask Liv, the words barely air. What did you both do? She doesn't answer. She reaches instead for the envelope, for the letter, but I'm faster. I slide everything toward me and, without breaking eye contact, lock the cassette back into my coat pocket. Enough, she says. This is the wrong door to open. No, I tell her, and hear in my voice something I've never heard before, my mother's voice, maybe. Whoever she truly is. It's the only one. The wind rises, rattling the stovepipe, making the cabin shudder like a creature waking. Across the lake, a snowmobile growls, far off, or closer than it sounds. Liv flinches at the noise. It's fear, not cold, that tightens her face. You're not safe here, she whispers. Not if you keep digging. I was never safe, I say. Just blind. The tape clicks off. Silence falls, thick and heavy. In it, I hear another knock, memory or warning, I can't tell. I bar the door anyway and sit with my back to it, the cassette in my fist, the lake breathing under the ice like a giant asleep. Somewhere in the dark, a truth with my name on it turns over and opens its eyes. By morning the lake had disappeared under a pale sheet of drifted snow, and the sky felt lower, as if the whole world had taken a breath and held it. I kept the letter folded in my pocket, the paper rough against my knuckles like a scab I couldn't stop touching. At the Lutheran church in town, Pastor Einar set his glasses on the tip of his nose and read aloud in Norwegian first, then in English, Each phrase weighed like a stone. If you are reading this, Astrid, I did not leave. They will say I ran. I was pushed toward the water. The child is mine. Signed, Ellen. He paused on the last line, cleared his throat, and added softly, there's a postscript. His finger tapped a cramped sentence along the margin. Hearthstone. Ledger. December. Hearthstone? I asked. In old houses they sometimes hide things under the first stone by the stove, he said. So the warmth remembers. I thanked him and left with a photocopy of the letter and a dull ache building behind my eyes. At the print shop I made 3 sets, one for a lawyer I hadn't hired yet, one for me, one to leave somewhere no one would think to look. On Main Street a truck idled too long at the curb while I crossed. I told myself it was nothing. In towns like this, nothing was the word people used for the thing everyone knew. Back at the cabin I knelt by the iron stove. The first stone was soot-black and stubborn, but under it lay exactly what Einar's finger had promised, a flattened tin ledger wrapped in a strip of waxed cloth and tied in a knot the size of a thumbnail. Inside, pages salted with ash scratched against my fingertips, lists of payments, dates, initials. R.H. In the bold, impatient script I remembered from permission slips and birthday cards. Cash in December, then again in January. Retainer noted beside a name I recognized, Halvorsen, the county sheriff back then. A map scrap fell from between the pages, pencil lines, the curve of the bay, a cross by the old boathouse. In the margin, December 14th after dark. My mouth went dry. I photographed everything. I put the ledger in a sealable bag. Then I stood at the window and watched the light thin toward afternoon. The same truck from town rolled past on the county road and didn't quite stop, just slowed until I could see the driver's face behind a blank square of glass, then moved on. The stove ticked as wood settled into coals. The cabin breathed. So did I. In the evening, when the north wind went knife-sharp, I called the only attorney whose name I trusted, someone a friend of a friend had once used for a custody case. He listened without interrupting, then said, "Bring the originals at first light. We'll make a plan. Don't keep them all in one place." "Someone's watching the road," I said. "That means you're already doing something right," he replied, which felt like praise and a threat at once. I tucked the ledger into my coat, shoved a spare set of copies into the old flour tin by the sugar, and taped the letter beneath the lid of the stove where only heat could find it. When I finally killed the lamp, the window answered with a moving black, headlights pausing at the bend, the engine's note dipping, and then the darkness sliding back into place as if it had never been disturbed. Just past midnight a sound lifted me out of sleep, thin as thread and twice as hard to break, the scrape of something against the siding, a careful hand where no careful hands should be. I slid from the bed without turning on a light, felt for the knife I'd left on the dresser, and stood listening to my own breath shape the room. The cabin held its air like an old secret. Then, a soft crush of snow, the unhooked whisper of a latch trying itself, the patient tap of gloved knuckles on glass. I pictured the cassette, the letter, the ledger, 3 bright minnows in a bucket with a hole. I cut sideways through the dark to the kitchen and lifted the shade with 2 fingers. The porch was a pale plain. At the edge of it, just where the steps begin, a pair of prints. Not boot soles. Snowmobile tracks lobed like insect wings, curving toward the trees. Whoever had come to the door had not walked to it. He had glided. My phone showed no bars. The lake likes you isolated. I put the knife between my teeth, pulled on my coat, and opened the door a crack. Cold poured in as if it owned the place. I crouched and flattened my palm above the nearest print. The edges were crisp. 10 minutes old, maybe less. I shut the door, slid the bolt, and dragged the ironwood bench against it for the primitive comfort of extra wood and metal between me and whatever was outside. In the morning, I drove to Duluth with the originals in a zipper folder under the floor mat. The highway unspooled in a locked white line. Trucks grazed my bumper as if impatient with my caution. In the rearview mirror, a gray SUV rode my wake for 20 miles, then turned off toward the quarry. I logged its plate in my head anyway, a number like a monotone prayer. The lawyer, Garrison, had eyes the color of old steel and a voice that didn't change whether he was saying hello or we're going to war. He spread my evidence on his conference table as if dressing a wound. We'll file a petition to amend your birth record and a motion to unseal the 1999 case, he said. We'll also lodge these tapes under seal to preserve chain of custody. Will that make me safe? I asked. Nothing makes you safe. But paper makes you visible. Visible people are harder to erase. I left the originals in his safe and kept only a copy of the letter folded under the insole of my boot. On the way back, I stopped at the co-op for coffee. The bell over the door hiccuped when I went in. At the bulletin board, between a flyer for missing cats and a notice about the ice fishing contest, someone had pinned a slip of ruled paper. Take the letter back to the lake. No signature. The tack had been pressed through twice, as if the hand that said it shook and then steadied. When I pulled into the cabin's drive, wind had braided the snowmobile tracks with new snow. For the first time since I was a child, I caught myself counting breaths to 60 and back, the way Liv taught me to sit out a storm. On 10, the kitchen window sounded with a crisp TCK, a pebble, I thought, and then looked down to see a white tooth on the sill. Deer, I told myself. Not human. But its root was clean. And it smiled without lips. Retired Sheriff Halvorsen lived in a split level on the edge of town, a place with plastic over the windows and an American flag faded to the color of glacial melt. He opened the door in a plaid shirt and the slack jaw of a man who'd stopped sleeping well years ago. You're Richard Hale's girl, he said, not inviting me in. I'm Ellen's, I answered, and watched the flinch climb his throat. He let me stand in the mudroom. A rack of fish spears leaned against the wall, their prongs shadowing the vinyl like bars. People knock around old things when they've buried their new ones, he said. Bad hobby. I showed him a photocopy of the ledger page with his surname next to retainer. His thumb floated above the ink, never touching. There was pressure, he said. Your daddy, Richard, he knew which boards to press, which nails to pull. He believed the lake keeps secrets. He believed in men like me to help it. You altered the report. I classified what the coroner couldn't prove. He stared at the fish spears. Ice takes people every year. It took your mother. That's all I wrote. But not all you knew. He exhaled through his nose, a sound like a door swelling in damp. There was noise at the boathouse that night. Lights out. A fight, maybe. When it got quiet, the wind came in hard from the north. We called it accident because if we'd called it anything else, the town would have had to look at itself in the mirror. We're not built for mirrors. And the hospital record? He rubbed his palm down his cheek until it rasped. The administrator owed favors. Your father paid some back for him. Babies are paperwork until they become people. Your paperwork became Liv's. You became hers. Do you feel sorry? I asked. It came out sharp. I feel old, he said. Old is different. He shuffled to a hall closet and returned with a small bait tin the color of lake water. Inside lay a cassette fragment in a cracked shell, a ribbon of tape spooled like a dead thing. Found this in evidence after I cleaned my badge out. I couldn't throw it away. Maybe that's me trying to be better in the last act. His voice shrank. Maybe it's just me being a coward later than I should have been. When I reached the parking lot, the gray SUV idled 3 rows back. A man sat behind the wheel with a hat brim pulled low. I turned my key and the car answered with a grinding sound like metal chewing metal. The hood latch wasn't fully set. I popped it and found the battery strap loosened, the negative lead half unscrewed, as if someone wanted the failure to be an inconvenience, not a wreck. I tightened the lead, shut the hood, and let the engine run until heat pushed against the glass. On the seat beside me, the bait tin rattled with the movement of the car, small and tinny, like a heart that had learned to beat through metal. Liv opened her door before I knocked, the way you do when you've been listening for footsteps. Her kitchen smelled like winter apples and bleach. She set a mug in front of me and didn't sit. You've been to Halvorsen, she said. He remembers the night, I said. He remembers everything except saying it out loud. Liv's mouth twitched. We were girls once, she said, eyes on the snow through the window. Ellen and me. She had the light. I had the rules. Then you came. The rules moved. You switched the bracelet, I said. At the hospital. She was gone, Astrid. The ice took her. Your father would have taken you next, maybe not with hands, but with the story he would write on you. So I wrote a different one. She finally sat, hands folded. I thought I could be enough. Enough to erase her? Enough to hide you from him. Is he my father? The question had lived under my tongue for days. It cut going out. She didn't blink. Not by blood. The room lurched. All my life the man on our mantel, Richard at 20 in a borrowed tux, had been the axis of our family myth. Liv kept talking, swift and low, as if the sound might outrun the meaning. Ellen loved a fisherman from the North Road. He left when the winter got mean. Your father found out too late to stop the making of you, but in time to build a story around the keeping of you. He needed heir with his name. I needed the child not to be punished for the sins of adults. So you saved me by stealing me, I said. I saved you by claiming you, she said, and the word came out with a strength that surprised us both. The state would have eaten you alive if there'd been a scandal. Men like Halvorsen would have signed the papers with clean hands and called it mercy. I did the ugly thing myself so no one else could. There was wet on her lashes now, not quite tears. I didn't kill her, Astrid. I didn't push her. I only failed to stop the people who could. A shape moved past the frosted glass of the back door, just a smudge of darker gray. Liv's eyes flicked to it and back, her face smoothing into something like calm that read to me as terror. They want quiet, she said. They don't want prison. They don't even fear God. They fear noise. Courts are noise. I'm filing, I said. The petition goes in tomorrow. Then come home tonight, she said. Don't sleep at the lake. I am home, I said, and stood. When I reached the cabin, the note was nailed to the door with a bent roofing nail, the paper stiff with cold. Take the letter back to the lake. Under it, a second line had been added in block letters like a child learning to write, or we will. I peeled it free and saved the nail. It had a smear of blue paint on its head. Same shade as Halvorsen's bait tin. Garrison spooled the fractured cassette onto a donor shell he kept for lost causes and old men who needed their wedding song rescued. The tape wobbled, caught, then landed on a stretch of sound that felt like breath held too long. My father's voice. Time hadn't rusted it. If she won't walk on her own, he said, kill the lights to the boathouse and she'll walk to the shore by sound. The ice is thin by the reeds. Another male voice, lower, flatter. Thin enough to make it look like she chose? A pause. A scrape. Thin enough to save us the trouble of choosing. Garrison hit stop, and we sat there with the old machine clicking like a friendly insect. He pinched the bridge of his nose and said, "This is not a small court case anymore." "I don't want prison," I said, surprised to hear the truth leave my mouth so cleanly. "I want my name back. I want Ellen's." "You'll get pushback," he said. "They'll try to gag the proceedings. They'll whisper words like closure and dignity and mean silence." "Let them whisper," I said. "I'm done being their echo." We filed 2 hours later, petition to amend my birth certificate naming Ellen Hale as my mother, motion to unseal the 1999 file, motion to preserve all materials held by the sheriff's office then and now. When we walked down the courthouse steps, the cold bit into my cheeks so hard my eyes watered. Across the street, a man in a brown parka lifted his phone, not pretending otherwise. I lifted mine back and photographed him photographing me. He turned away first. That night at the cabin, I didn't light the stove. I wanted the house to be as cold as the lake. I wanted the wind to have nothing to push against. I ate crackers from a box and sat with my back to the door, counting the creak of the logs that held the roof over my head. Around 2 a.m., a single gunshot punched the air from somewhere past the tree line, not aimed, not close, a punctuation mark for a sentence no one had said out loud. I lay down fully dressed and dreamed of a white room in a white hospital with a white bracelet on a newborn's foot and a pen that carried the color out of a mother's name and wrote another in its place. When I woke, I tasted ink. At daybreak, I carried the ledger, the tapes, the letters, copies into the car and left the cabin with the curtains open on purpose, an empty stage. The lake lay sheeted and still. On the far shore, a snowmobile traced a new line over yesterday's line as if practicing a signature. The courtroom's heat was stingy. My breath smoked faintly until the radiators figured out how to argue with February. Garrison set our stack of exhibits down with a thud that made the clerk look up. Across the aisle, the Hale family's counsel, Tailored, calm, hair like a helmet, smiled the way people smile when they're about to call you dramatic. Cause number 14 to 23, the judge said. Hale versus Hale. Petitioner seeks amendment of vital record and related relief. I stood when he said my name. My knees didn't lock. Small victories count in rooms like this. Defense went first. Fabrication, grief, misinterpretation, no body recovered. They said the tapes could be deepfakes and the ledger a theatrical prop. They said I'd fallen under the sway of outsiders with agendas. No one said Ellen's name like it belonged to a person. Garrison answered without heat. He offered chain of custody affidavits for the tapes and a declaration from Halvorsen about the ledger's provenance. He slid the hospital annotation under a document camera so the red correction glowed on the screen like an infection, corrected by order of administration. He called Pastor Einar, who read the letter in both languages, steady as a metronome. Then he played the tape. If she won't walk on her own, the ice is thin by the reeds. There are sentences that leave a room different than they found it. This was one. Somewhere behind me a woman muffled a sob. The judge's eyes cut to the speaker as if to confirm that sound had indeed come from a thing he could point to and not from the walls. We broke at noon. In the hallway Liv waited by the water fountain with her coat still buttoned to the throat. Up close she looked smaller, like a house shorn of its porch. I will speak if they let me, she said. Not to save myself. To save me? I asked. To stop them from writing the ending, she said. It's the only thing I still know how to do. In the afternoon the court admitted our exhibits under seal. The judge set day 2 for testimony. On my way to the door a man brushed my shoulder. Astrid, he said. His accent had the roundness of the North Road. You don't know me. You should. He slipped a folded photograph into my palm and disappeared into the crowd. Outside, under the weak sun, I opened the photo. A young fisherman, 20 maybe, laughing at the wrong moment, winter cap crooked, eyes of blue I recognized like pain. On the back, in faded ink, Ellen plus A. No last name. No date. A ghost with a smile. Liv took the stand as if stepping onto ice, chin high, weight measured, ready for the give. Garrison walked her through the hospital, the bracelet, the choice. She didn't cry. When he asked whether Richard Hale was my biological father, she said, no, and let the word sit. The defense rose with knives wrapped in silk. So you admit to fraud, counsel said. To falsifying a vital record. To deceiving this child for her entire life. I admit to choosing between evils, Liv said. I chose the one that left the fewest scars I could see. And the ledger, he asked. Conveniently discovered in your family's cabin after 24 years? I never opened that hearthstone, she said. I never had to. I had my own stone to carry. They called Halvorsen. He arrived smaller than his legend, hat in hand, gilt stitched into his cuffs. Under oath, he said the word retainer and didn't choke on it. He said pressure and discretion and town stability, and then, when Garrison asked who ordered the correction on the hospital record, he said the administrator's name and sat like a man who had just signed for a heavy package. We played the tape fragment again. The defense objected, citing authenticity. The judge overruled, citing ears. I watched his face while my father's voice crossed the room like a winter shadow. Judges are trained to be stone. Even stones remember weather. Then Garrison called me. He had me tell the court about the letter, the boathouse map, the long nights, the snow under the door, the note nailed to the cabin. He had me say Ellen's name until it felt like a bell rung for the first time in a burned church. When he finished, defense moved to seal my amended birth record for the dignity of all parties. Opposed, Garrison said before the judge could look our way. Opposed, I said with him, my voice carrying more than I thought it could. Dignity doesn't live in the dark. The judge rubbed his jaw, eyes on the stack of exhibits that had grown into a new kind of furniture. I'll rule tomorrow, he said. This court will not be hurried by anyone's fear. In the corridor afterward, I found the fisherman from the photo waiting at the bottom of the stairs, not 20 anymore, beard gone gray at the edges. I was a boy, he said, which is another way of saying a coward. I left before the thaw. Ellen deserved better. Did you love her? I asked. He nodded once. Enough to leave. Not enough to take her with me. Measure me by that. I put the photo back into my pocket and stepped outside into a snowfall that felt like static. Across the street, the gray SUV idled again, and then slid away, leaving a ribbon of slush that refroze as I watched. The room held its breath while the judge read. I'd seen men hold fish up for the camera with less ceremony. He started with findings, the way judges do when they'd rather climb the stairs than jump the last three. The ledger met a baseline of authenticity. Halvorson's testimony was credible insofar as it confessed power instead of seeking it. The tapes, though aged and partial, bore the ring of uncoached speech. The hospital annotation was real. Accordingly, he said, this court grants the petition to amend the petitioner's birth record. Her mother of record shall be listed as Ellen Hale. The name left his mouth plain and unadorned. It felt like a door unlatching. He denied the motion to seal. He referred the 1999 matter to the state for review, in light of newly surfaced evidence suggestive of coercion and cover. He ordered the clerk to accept a victim impact statement into the file, should I wish to write one an odd mercy, but I took it. Defense muttered words like appeal and privacy. The judge thanked them for their diction and moved on. When he struck the gavel, the sound hit me in the chest like a stopped sob. I turned in the aisle and found Liv. She didn't smile. She lifted her fingertips in a gesture so small it might have been a tremor. We're what we survive, the motion said. Then she was gone into the crowd. On the courthouse steps, the man in the brown parka waited with his phone ready and his feet planted just far enough from mine to be legal. I raised my own phone. Take your picture, I said. Just spell my mother's name right when you send it. I don't spell, he said. I deliver. To who? He tipped his chin toward the lake. Who else is there? At the edge of town, the snow thinned into a lace the wind could lift with 2 fingers. I drove to the boathouse on the map. The reeds rattled in their winter skins. The roof had slumped, boards silvered by weather until they looked like bones. I set a white stone on the threshold and said her name aloud to the water, to the ice, to the air. Ellen. The ice answered with a sound like an old door opening very slowly. A crack traced itself across the surface, spidering toward the reeds, then stopped as if the lake had changed its mind. Behind me, the shore was empty. If the gray SUV had followed, it was now simply another color of winter. On my way back, I passed a boy on a snowmobile, cheeks red with speed, goggles up. He raised a hand because that's what people do on back roads. They practice being less alone than they are. I raised mine back and felt, for a breath, the lightness of a thing returned. Garrison filed the new certificate with the county clerk and handed me the stamped copy like a birth, which in a way it was. Paper doesn't change blood, he said. It changes what blood is allowed to mean. I slid the document into the inside pocket of my coat and felt its weight there like a pocket watch counting a truer time. I wrote the victim's statement at the cabin with my gloves on because heat felt like a luxury and I wanted the words to see their breath. I wrote that truth does not resurrect, it reassigns. It moves a name from one mouth to another and asks the living to learn how to pronounce it. I wrote that men built a story around my body and called it protection, and that the lake kept it until I was old enough to swim. At dusk, I walked the shoreline where the reeds begin. The boy on the snowmobile had etched loops on the flat like cursive no one could read. A crow worked at something in the snow and found it too stubborn, then rose and wrote a black letter across the gray sky. On the far side of the bay, a house threw one yellow square of window onto the ice. I thought of Liv, who had committed a crime and an act of love so tightly braided that even a court could not tell them apart without fraying the rope. I thought of Halvorson, who had mistook order for goodness. I thought of the fisherman with the kind, coward's eyes. I thought of Richard, whose money had taught weaker men how to be unmade. I thought of Ellen, whose name had come home. When I turned back toward the cabin, snow began again, thin, steady, a page rewriting itself from the top down. I left the porch light off and sat at the table with the stove dark, listening to the lake breathe the way a sleeping animal does when it's dreaming of running. My phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. You got what you came for. Leave the rest to God. I typed and erased 3 replies and then wrote the only one I believed. God isn't the one who needs to hear this. People do. Before I slept, I set the cassette, the letter, and the ledger on the table. I took the nail that had held the threat to my door and pushed it into the wood near the edge. One bright head, one small claim, a mark that said I was here and this table is mine. Truth did not make me warm. It did not make me less alone. It made me accounted for. In a world that prefers erased women, that felt like more than victory. It felt like presence. If someone had asked me what I learned, I would have said this: the smallest court in the smallest county can be larger than a church and louder than a lake. It can take a name the world hid and make it readable again. It can hand a daughter a document and say, "Start here. Walk forward." I slept without dreaming. In the morning, the stone at the boathouse sat where I'd left it, dusted with new snow like a shoulder someone had touched and then forgiven. I stepped outside with the folder in my hands. The wind was still cold, but now it cleansed instead of breaking me. I understood. Truth doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't heal old wounds or change the past. But it gives the living a chance to stop being prisoners of someone else's decisions. Small claims court might seem insignificant, just disputes over papers and signatures. But here, I reclaimed my name, my history, my voice. Here, I stopped being the victim of another's lie. I paused on the courthouse steps, lifted my head to the gray sky, and whispered to myself, "Now I know who I am, and no one will ever silence me again." But the thought lingered. How many others live in the shadows of secrets? How many stories remain buried because their owners are too afraid to speak? And what about you? If your past were stolen, if your very name was erased from your own family, would you fight to uncover the truth? Or would you accept someone else's lie as your only reality?